Thank you for all being here. I'm very happy to be here. I was a bit involved in the organization, but all of it actually goes to the organizers. But I really feel IronCamp is, for me at least, an example of what the Drupal community is really all about. That we not only have camps in one single country, but that we all come together as multiple countries and organize such an event. So my presentation about, or my keynote today, should be about the future of Drupal. But let's first look into predicting the future in general. I'm not the first one that wants to predict the future, or at least tries to. There are many people in the world that are trying to predict the future. And the really cool thing about predicting the future, you can look into the history and see if it was correct or not. So let's look what people in the year 1900 said how 2000 is going to be. And we're 2016, so we can be pretty sure if they were right or wrong, and not just a couple of years apart. But let's first look into, 1900. Nobody of us lived there, at least I don't see anybody being more than 100 years old. But 1850, the light bulb got involved. So 50 years before 1900, the light bulb was there. 1880, the radio was there. And 1985, the car was involved. So we're very close. People realized the first time that electricity, the technique, all the things, they can really be something very cool and stuff that is going to happen soon. And of course, people had a lot of ideas what will happen in 100 years. We just see cars driving around in the street. What can that be? That was one of the ideas. And he's an artist in 1900, and he imagined that he can talk to his wife on a screen with something in his hand, and they can talk over long distances. So that artist knew 1900 that we will all going to use FaceTime or Skype or Google Hangouts or whatever you want to use, but without ever seeing a projector or anything at all. They correctly said that in 100 years we will start communication over long distances without being at the same place. The next one was the same artist. He also said, and maybe we will have a dictaphone or something. So we talk to a device, and that device understands what we're saying and writes it down. So he knew what we have with Siri and Google and all these other things, that today we can start interacting with our cars, with our computers, and things like that. So they were actually very good in trying to figure out what the future is going to be. Interestingly, they also had very weird ways. So they were actually hoping that you can just put books into something and you grind it and you just get the books into your computer. Interestingly, the whole thing happened in Matrix again, where the people just learned how to fly a helicopter within 3 seconds. But we're not there yet. So you see, predicting the future is something that can be either fully correct or also completely wrong. So all the things I'm going to tell you today that I believe what the future of Drupal is going to be, I'm not 100% sure. But I feel that all these technologies, they're emerging right now. They're either already here or they will come. And I think, especially in the web, where so many things are changing so fast, it's very important that we look at what is going to come at us. What are we going to work with in the future? And that's what I want to do. So what do I believe that the future of Drupal and the future of web in general is going to be about? First, I think we're going to hear that word much more, and not just because it's a hot shit right now, because it's going to be really part of our future. Decoupled websites. We're going to talk much more about microservices in general. We're going to talk much more about containers, and we're also going to talk much more about personalization. So for each of these 4 topics, I want to show you what they are, what they bring, what they can do, what is really hard about them, what is also very cool about them, and how Drupal can help us in achieving all of these. And yes, all of these 4 things can be achieved with Drupal already. So let's look at the first one. Let's look into personalization. So what is that? So from a technical point of view, it means that the layout, the content, the usability, everything is adapted to your visitor. And that can be based on the age of the person. If you know that the visitor of the website is 20 years old or 70 years old, we can show them different things. Or based on where the person right now is. As McDonald's, it doesn't make a lot of sense in showing them if I'm on Mars and open my iPhone, and there is no McDonald's on Mars, to show them a location finder, because the chance that somebody is going to find a McDonald's on Mars is going to be very small. So I can also do stuff on devices. So I know, do I visit that right now with my MacBook? Is it just a Mac? Is it a PC? Or is it a mobile device or not? So I can react to that. Or the behavior. So based on what the user did the last 3 times that he visited my site, I can show him an adapted or personalized start page. So there's a lot of ways in how to do that. So you might maybe wonder, why do we need that? Well, first of all, we are all individuals. We all have different ideas of what we need on a website, of our history, of our experience, and the websites can adapt to that. Second, of course, it's a big topic in commerce. If you know exactly what that person wants, like today, Black Friday, especially in the US, a huge thing. If I know exactly what the person was looking for in the last 2 weeks, I can show that person that deal on the start page, and the chance that the person will buy it is quite high. But not only that, we can also talk about accessibility. Because if I know that the person is blind, that is using my website, why do I even try to load pictures? Because the person cannot see it, so let's adapt the website in a way that it loads faster, and that the screenwriter can better understand of what is really happening there. And that's not only for blind, it's for any type of accessibility. So that helps a lot in the future. The hard parts, though, about doing a personalized website, well, you can imagine no single page view is going to be the same anymore. Every page view is going to be adapted, personalized to that user, to the history and everything. So testing and debugging that is going to be quite complex, because everything is going to be different. And of course, it also depends on the data quality that we have. If my website believes that I'm 40 years old, live in South Africa, and I have 2 kids, which is all not correct, but maybe the website believes that's what it is, and it will show me wrong things, and I'm going to be very disappointed by the website and maybe not use it. So it can not only do very good, it can also do a bit harm in terms of that it can be completely wrong. So we have to find a way in how can we get really good data to actually show that. So in each of these 4 things I want to talk about, I want to show you a killer feature that I myself experienced. And the one here is actually about, so people of you know, I fly drones in my private time, and I crash a lot, so you need to buy a lot of parts, and they're very expensive. So you go to a website, and you see a new part, and you feel like, okay, should I buy that, should I not buy that? You're unsure. So I decide, no, let's not do it, and I just leave the shop website a bit sad because I didn't buy anything, but okay, I'm not going to need that part. So then I go work again. In the evening, I open Facebook on my phone, and Facebook shows me an advertisement for exactly that part that I was looking at in another website before, and I get 5% off. So there was a Facebook tracking thing installed on that website. Facebook realized that I'm logged in on Facebook, not on that website. The website tells Facebook that I visited that part, and they showed me an ad for exactly that part that I was looking at before. And of course, you can imagine I immediately bought it because, hey, I got 5% off. So personalization is not only on single websites, it can also be across multiple websites. They now start to talk with each other. They know what you have done before on another website, and they can do personalization based on all of that. So how does Drupal help us that? Well, first, Drupal 8 has a very cool tool that is called cache tags. And that means you can now start caching things not only based on the URL, but you can also cache things based on the age of people or the location of your visitor. So and that allows us to have still very fast sites, even though the site is maybe dynamically rendered. Plus also Drupal has a fully context-aware system, which means that everywhere you are, if you're rendering a block or a footer or a header or a comment, you know about all these context-aware things, like where is the person from, how old is that person if you have that data. So that means any time, any place that you need to render something or you need to output something from Drupal, you have the context available. And that is the key feature for personalization. Without these two things, it would not really be possible to do personalized websites. And Drupal 8 already has it as of today. You can use it. You can build websites with it. And I can tell you other CMSs, no matter if open source or proprietary, they are lacking behind that. They don't have these tools yet. And they're very, very hard working on it. And we with Drupal 8, we already have it since more now than a year. So we can build and start and experience these things. So that was about personalization. Let's look into the next topic, decoupled, or also called headless, or JavaScript front-end, or isomorphic is another topic that floats around. So let's look at that, why and what is that actually doing. So first of all, we all use browsers. We use browsers to visit websites, and turns out they are actually very good in JavaScript. All browsers today can run JavaScript. So the idea is, instead of doing the rendering on PHP side or either on the server side, if the browser can actually do JavaScript very well, why don't we render the stuff in JavaScript? Because I don't have to worry about sizes or speed and whatever, because it happens everything in the browser. That is going to be much faster. And the data itself then comes from the backend. So we either have JSON, we have XML, we have REST, we have GraphQL, pick whatever you want. So basically, the front end loads and just requests the backend and loads the data from the backend and renders that in the browser. And things like personalization, you don't even have to worry about, because the device, you immediately know. You can react based on that immediately in the front end. One important thing, though, it does not mean we don't need a backend. We will still need a full-fledged backend, because the data processing, the data crunching, the data getting from different places, that is not done by the front end. It's still the backend that gathers all the data, saves the data, editors editing data. The backend is just not actually showing HTML anymore. It's just showing the data in some data format, like JSON, and the front end is rendering that. So why do we want that? Well, first of all, it's going to be much faster. Because if you click around the website, what happens these days without the decoupled website, your browser starts every single click. He starts completely from scratch. He throws away the whole DOM and creates a new page. Yes, he's maybe caching images and CSS files, but every JavaScript file is fully executed from start every time. That's very nice for testing, because we can be sure every time we have a new environment, but it's very, very bad for page speed. Why, if the header of my website is the same on every single website, why, or every single click, why do I render that again and again and again and again? It's not necessary. And if you run everything on the front end, you can just load the parts that really have changed of your website. Second one, I'm spending quite some time in South Africa right now, and the internet there is not very good. So for a long time, we talked about that we shouldn't use JavaScript because there are people out there that cannot run JavaScript. I believe that's wrong. We should use more JavaScript because there are a lot of people out there that don't have steady internet connections. JavaScript allows me to cache stuff on the browser side And if the data is not, if the backend is not reachable because my internet connection is not working right now, I can reuse cached stuff that I visited the last time. Let's go back to our McDonald's example. The location of McDonald's are not going to change every day. So if I'm opening the app and I visited the McDonald's yesterday, the map system that shows me where all the McDonald's are can use the data that it has cached from yesterday. And all it has to do is go to the backend and say, did you open a new location? No? Okay, I'm not loading all the locations again. So, and that even works completely offline. So if I don't have internet on that day when I really need the data, it can show me the old data. It can tell me, hey, that data is 1 day old. Decide yourself if you want to trust it or not, but at least it is there. And that is something that only works if you have the website running in the front end, means in the browser. And the second part is you can actually have completely separated development cycles of the front end and the back end. We right now have a project where the front end team completely finished the building of the front end, and we never ever started a single Drupal site. So the complete front end is completely implemented themselves with mocks of the back end and things like that. And the backend team never really had to start because they can wait till the front end says, okay, now I'm ready. Now these are all the data that I need, and please backend now build me the APIs for that. So you can already start testing your front end, your usability, your accessibility without ever needing to write one single line of backend code. So you might want to say, well, but I heard decoupled front ends are very bad for SEO and accessibility. That was true, but important was it was true. It's not anymore because of a very interesting word called isomorphic. Because it turns out JavaScript also is very good on the server side. So it can not only run on the front end, it can also run on the server itself. So what do we do? Well, if there is a request, and we know that this request is the very first time that you load a decoupled website, and you request that from a Node.js server, that Node.js server realizes, oh wait, you don't have the app yet. So what I'm going to do as a server, I'm going to pre-render the whole website for you, and I'm sending you a full-fledged HTML with everything rendered, with everything done, and that is loaded by the browser. That means it's going to be very fast. And second, browsers that don't have JavaScript don't need JavaScript because they're just getting HTML and CSS. And they show that. And then what happens, there's a small JavaScript in there that tries to load. And if it realizes, oh, well, you actually have JavaScript, what it does, it starts to gradually replace the whole thing that was just HTML and CSS into a full-fledged JavaScript application, like you would have loaded it from the beginning as a full JavaScript application. And that means first, your site is going to be very fast because the first page load is completely just HTML and CSS. And second, it also works for browsers that don't have JavaScript enabled. It works for robots. It works for whatever you can imagine. It works for screen readers, everything. So the whole of like, oh, no, I cannot use it anymore because SEO and accessibility, that one is gone. It has, though, quite some hard parts. So first of all, knowing Drupal, if you want to have a view and an exposed filter, you go into the view, you click like I want to have an exposed filter, and I save that, and the front end has an exposed filter. Great. With decoupled stuff, nah, it doesn't work anymore. Because you have to build everything, you have to implement everything. Of course, there are plugins. Like if you use Angular or React, there are plugins that do search experiences and things like that. But it's not as easy as it used to be with just having an UI that I can click together and I have my exposed filters. Plus, you're going to build a lot of logic in the front end. So, for example, the search experience, like facets, which facet should be shown at which time, when should it be hidden, how does it look if it has 0 results, and these things, all these things are now going to be built inside front end. So the stuff we used to build in PHP, in backend, with that system, you have to build them in Node.js in the front end. So it's not only anymore that the front end part of building a website is just HTML and CSS. It's now going to be a lot of JavaScript, plus you're going to build logic in there. And the last question, of course, is, well, we do have a Drupal admin interface. So what are we doing with that? Are we also replacing that with a decoupled system? Are we just keeping the Drupal part? So that is one of the not really known questions right now. At least for us, for the project that I have seen, it's just they leave the admin interface completely like in Drupal regular theme, and they just use the customer facing. That one is actually built in a decoupled system. And the last one is a bit an interesting one. There are many of tools out there. There is Angular 1, Angular 2, there is Ember, there's React, there's Elm, there's so many different tools out there that you can use to build decoupled front ends, and they're changing every half a year or every year. So it's so brand new that there is a lot of different systems that exist that start. So it's sometimes very hard to keep up with them because the tool that you used a year ago is maybe already old a year later. So please choose wisely if you want to choose a decoupled front-end system because it can change. The killer feature for decoupled stuff, actually I have multiple of these because I couldn't decide which one I really like most. So first of all, you can have two completely independent development streams. You can have a front-end team and you can have a back-end team, and they can have different sprint lengths, they can have different strategies in how they work. All they have to agree is to an interface in how they talk to each other, but because you can mock them, you're also not depending on each other. So all you need is a specification between these two development streams, and they can completely work separate. They can be two different companies, they can be two different teams in two different time zones. That all works. Second one, you can test the front end without a single line of backend code. So if the client asks, how does that look like or so, you can now do that without ever writing Drupal backend. Plus, the isomorphic stuff is now, from a technical point of view, a fix or a solution for all the problems that we had in the past with decoupled because no SEO, no accessibility. So how does Drupal help us with that? Well, first of all, there's a module in core that is called REST. And REST allows an external system, like a decoupled front end, completely interacting with Drupal via APIs only. That means you can load nodes via views, you can load any entity via views, you can load single entities, you can tell which of the information of an entity you want, but you can also create, you can also delete, and you can update existing entities all via an API. And then we have contrib modules that provide even better support of REST. Plus, we have modules that fully support GraphQL, one of the newest interface technology invented by Facebook, is already capable of running with Drupal. You just download the module, enable it, and you have full GraphQL support for all your entities, loading stuff, and things like that. And of course, there is also a lot of contrib modules that you find already integrated Ember or Angular or React. There are already contrib modules out there that show you, that explain you, how can I connect with a React? You don't have to learn all the things yourself. So Drupal, again, is at the forefront of these new technologies. All of them are already capable, there are already tests out there, there are already existing examples out there that you can take, that you can learn, that you can play around and be really sure that what is gonna come in the future, if you maybe wanna try that in one of your next projects or in your own website. Let's go to the next topic, microservices. So, well, what is a microservice? Well, basically, it is the idea of splitting up bigger applications into smaller parts. That's the whole idea of a microservice. And the idea is that these parts, these smaller parts, they start to communicate via APIs with each other. And so one of the big examples that you probably heard of is called Internet of Things. So instead of building a tool that has 3 buttons, each of the button is its own thingy, and if I need another button, I can just add another one, and they have APIs and they communicate with each other. That's just one of an example, but that's what is happening with Internet of Things. Internet of Things is possible because of microservices and because of APIs. So I can customize all the things. So why do we want microservices? Why do we split up bigger applications into smaller? Well, first of all, maintenance and testability of smaller parts is much easier. If I need to test a whole car, that he is doing everything completely correct at all the time, that's much harder than just testing one single button if I press the button that he's doing something. So with splitting up, I do much easier. Smaller parts are also much easier to understand. If I look at the code of big and smaller projects, the smaller one is easily to understand. So for a new person to understand a complex system built out of smaller microservices is much easier to understand because I can first learn the first one, and then the second one, then the third one. And smaller parts are also easier replaceable. If I just want to replace one part, I know exactly what that part does in the big system. And if I still implement the same APIs and interfaces, I can be sure that it still works, and I don't have to worry what else maybe is going to happen out there if I just replace that small part. One of the things, for example, that is Drupal is sometimes a problem. You don't know by what is a module used. Can I disable that module? I don't know, because I don't know what a module is used in within Drupal. Of course, there are quite some hard parts about microservices. First of all, the question is, where do you split up? Not every complex tool, or if you want to build a complex application, immediately shows, well, okay, you can split here, and you can split here, and you can split here. So sometimes you maybe think, okay, no, I want to combine these two, and then you realize, well, it would be possible to split up. So it is some experience. It needs a lot of experience to know exactly where to do the cut. And at the end, if I have an application and I split it up in 10 different smaller parts, well, what can happen is that I have 10 tools and 10 programming languages and 10 coding styles. So even though I split up, I still have to make sure that they use at least a common ground of maybe a programming language, or maybe a coding style, or a deployment style, or things like that. It can be very hard, and suddenly I have like some parts of my website are built in JavaScript, the other one is built in Go, the third part is built in PHP, and then I maybe, I don't know, add some Python in there. And now suddenly I have a huge system that nobody can maintain anymore. And local development is also much harder, because if I have a tool that now suddenly runs 3 development languages or programming languages, I now need to run these also locally. So that's going to be quite complex, like how do I do that, how do I connect them local, etc. The killer feature, though, was one of experience that I had myself. So as you might know, we have a hosting company, and hosting means that you have some code on the left side, and I want to push that to my servers on the right side. And I have a system in the middle that was quite complex, that has webhooks and does deployment things and stuff like that. The problem is, though, if the servers on the right side don't work anymore, I couldn't deploy anymore. So what happened was that when the servers were down because of maintenance or whatever, sometimes they have to be down, I couldn't deploy anymore. So all the deployments completely failed because there was just one system in it. The system couldn't compete with like something being down on the right side. So we were looking and we were thinking, okay, well, we can just, in like the webhook and deployment stuff in the middle, I can just put in a second one in there, like do it high availability, and then synchronize the status between them, but maybe one of them is down, or what happens if like, it's just quite complex. So we were never really happy in just doubling the whole system, because that was very complex. Nobody really knew what it all does, and etc. So we just thought, let's split it up. Let's split up our system that does webhooks and deployments. Let's split it up in 2 completely independent systems. That means, and in the middle, we put a database. So that means, if the webhooks are coming in from the left side, the first tool, all that responsibility of that first tool is take the webhooks and put them into a database. Save them there for later. And the right system basically connects to the database and runs deployments on the right side. That's all what that thing is doing. It has no understanding of where the data comes from the database. So they're completely two different independent systems. So what can happen now if the write part is down because whatever, the servers are down, the deployments don't work or whatever, the webhooks on the left side, they still work. Because the webhook system does not understand or has no knowledge about the write part at all. All it does, it takes webhooks in and saves them into the database. So we fixed a quite complex problem with separating two tools into separate ones. So we created two microservices out of the big tool with having a webhooks and the deployment system. But that talks about hosting, and that talks about like another. Well, how does it actually work in Drupal? Well, interestingly, have you ever seen the vendor folder in a Drupal that you installed? That thing is part of an initiative of Drupal that said, why do we implement everything ourselves? If there are very good tools out there that already do that. And with that, we are decoupling, we're removing, we're microservicing Drupal itself with using external tools. So Symfony or Twig, we're just using these tools from externally, we're using the APIs of these tools, we don't have any programming control over these. Yes, we can send pull requests, but at the end, it's managed and maintained by somebody else, but that gives us we can focus on what is really important for us, the Drupal part, and we don't have to worry about all the other things. So at the end, Drupal already does that internally. It starts to microservice all parts of Drupal and separating it and just consuming APIs with each other. Plus, Drupal itself, with all the core and contrib modules that you have with REST and XML and JSON, you can now build Drupal into a bigger part where you have a system that works everything via APIs. So Drupal already does it internally, plus it also allows you to use Drupal inside of a big microservice architecture where Drupal is just one tiny bit part of it. Like if you want to use Drupal to receive some data and move it forward, there's no problem. Drupal has the contrib modules and other things already there. Okay, the last one, and at least for me, one of the most exciting one. Containers, or also called Docker. Docker is just one of the container technology, but I'm going to talk about containers in general. So, what are containers? The easiest one that I could find is they're basically an image of a complete hosting environment. So all you need to run whatever, let's say a Drupal site, all you need, that means the web server, the database server, and all these things, instead of installing them, you're creating images of these, and you can reuse these images again and again and again. And the really cool part is you can actually create them on your local. You can test them on your local system, and you can push them to a server and run them on the server again, and you can be sure that they run and work the same like they worked on the local system. That is something that is allowed or possible with containerization. And the last cool thing is they can run everywhere. So that means you don't have to worry anymore. Is it going to be like that hoster, or is it going to be like a virtualization? Is it going to be bare metal? Is it going to be which Linux distribution? It doesn't matter. You can run it on OS X, you can run it on the Windows. So it allows you with containers, like containers changed the shipping part, where it was very hard in the past to load every single part on a ship. Now you just take the whole container, you put it on the ship, and every container is going to be exactly the same. The containers, you can put them on top of each other. So the same revolution also happens in the whole hosting environment. We can reuse stuff again and again, and we can also build them locally. One of the very interesting things, though, is containers can die and restart very fast. A container itself is not something anymore that is meant to run forever. If you build a system that depends on the container itself running, or the thing that runs your Drupal site runs forever, that's not going to work anymore. That's what we gave up. With having a system that can run everywhere, that can restart very fast, it also means it will happen. So you have to build a site. So why do we want that? Why do we want to have containerization? Well, first of all, it means if you build some special Drupal thing with a special PHP module, let's say you use something special of PHP, you can implement that locally. You can implement it locally. You can test it local. You can make sure that the PHP module is doing exactly what you need. You create an image from it, and you push it up, and it will run exactly the same like you tested it locally. So you, as a developer that decides, I'm going to use that PHP module, can test it, can run it local, and can be sure that it later on works also on the production side. That means you have fully testable code anywhere you run it. On your local, in your Jenkins, in your Travis CI, whatever you want to run it, it's going to be the same again and again and again. Plus, they are portable. I can take my container image and can give it to somebody else, and that person, all that person needs is just run it, and that's it. There's no additional things needed to be installed. So if we go back to our microservices that we talked before, where we suddenly have 4 programming languages and different ways, well, you just have 4 images and you can all run them on your local. So the problem of running it locally, being very complex, is suddenly fixed with containers. There are some hard parts about that, though. First of all, you need some knowledge about hosting. You need to understand what hosting is. What is a database server? What is a reverse proxy, and all these things. So there needs some time. It's not very complex, and you don't need to know every single nitty-gritty parts, but you need to learn some things about how hosting works and what the whole tools are about. Second part is, unfortunately, you cannot run just Docker or containers anywhere in the world right now because the hosting companies are not there yet. It takes some time for them to adapt, to accept Docker images, to receive them, and to work on them. There are tools already out there. They exist. You can use them. But if you just go to probably to your Drupal hoster right now and tell them, hey, I have a Docker images, can I run that on production? That's not going to work yet. So there is some time there for everybody to adapt. Like in the past, when the containers got introduced into the shippings, the ships also had to adapt first to take these containers. We had needed to build cranes that can put the containers on. All of that is happening right now, just in the whole part of hosting. And the last very interesting thing, there is no short fix on production yet. So you cannot log in anymore just on the production side, open your VI inside SSH on your production server and just edit something. Or? Yeah. I mean, you can maybe do that, but the next time the container is going to restart, the code is gone. But I think actually that's a good thing. That forces us to really follow good development practices, to follow continuous integration workflows, to make sure everything that I deploy to production is tested before and all these things. So that is something that forces you, but also allows you. And the last hard part, especially with Drupal unfortunately sometimes expects stuff to be persistent. And with Docker or containers in general, that's a bit hard to achieve. Like Node.js, for example, can much easier just handle to die and come back. Drupal is a bit a hard part there. It is possible, it needs a bit of knowledge, it needs to build engineering around that. But unfortunately, Drupal is not fully built for that. So for me, the killer feature is actually quite an easy one. It's just that you can now test the code and the hosting environment that is going to run your production site later. You can test on your local. How many times in the past I've heard, but it runs on my local, and say like, okay, well now we take your notebook and put it into the data center and that's going to run the production site? Most probably not. But with Docker or containers, that is now possible because I can be almost 100% certain that the things that are running locally will run the same behavior also on production. Because the container is going to be the same. I'm just taking the container from my local and putting it on my production ship. And that's it. So how does Drupal that? Well, actually it turns out a lot of your hosting companies already use containers internally. You maybe don't know, but they use that systems already. They use it. They allow you either local hosting environments based on Docker, or they use it in production already. So and more of them are allowing you now to also have access to that. Plus, there are Docker images built by the community. You don't have to learn everything about Docker and how you build an image and all these things. There are projects out there that you can just download and run and start and use them. You don't have to learn everything. You can just use them right away. And as mentioned, you have local hosting environments built on Docker right now. So you don't have to install MAMP anymore. You don't have to worry about different PHP versions, or I need a Solr, or I need a Varnish, or whatever. There are tools out there that make your local development experience much faster because of containers. Because now if you want to run a multi-core Solr cluster on your local computer, you just download it and you start it and it's running. In the past, that maybe wasn't even possible to run on your local computer. So, let's wrap up. I believe the future of Drupal is going to be personalized websites with JavaScript frontend based on microservices and hosted on Docker. I feel the same. It is a lot of change. It is a lot of new things. It is a lot of things that you probably never heard about or just heard about and were hoping that it doesn't come. It does, and it's good. We are learning as a Drupal community, we are learning so much more how other communities, how other systems are already built. Plus, it also allows us to have people from other communities, other companies, other open source, other proprietary systems now work with us together. And actually, you don't have to worry. First, it's not going to happen all tomorrow. It will take a lot of time for all the different systems to adapt. It's a small rolling process that happens in steps. So you can learn, and you can try out, and you can play with it, and we can also teach each other. And the really cool stuff is Drupal has support for all of that already. All of the 4 things that I told you about are already possible with Drupal today. You can start right now and use all of the 4 tools. If you compare that to other proprietary systems or other open source systems, they are not there yet. So with Drupal 8, we've built a tool that is fully capable of using the future already now. You don't have to worry about that, and you can try out and you can play. You don't have to wait for somebody else to first implement it. You can do it as of today. And the last thing, with being here, you did the first and most important step already. Coming together and teaching each other is the most important thing. I really believe life is a playground. You can only learn when you play with stuff, when you break it, when you rebuild it, when you look at it. And that's what we all have to do, but we shouldn't do it alone. We have to do it together. We have to come together. Look at this camp as a seesaw. Playing alone on a seesaw is not fun. I tried it, it's not fun. And so coming together at a camp like this, organizing it, or just coming here, is being together on a seesaw, learning together about all these 4 things. I know there is at least one person in that room right now that has more knowledge than you, and that's perfectly fine, and that's okay. But we have to exchange that knowledge. So go to sessions, go talk to each other, go to sprints, play around, talk about it, learn, communicate, and connect with each other on these 3 days now. It's your chance to learn about the future, to learn about the new tools, talk about it, and be more ready for whatever is going to come tomorrow, in 1 week, or in a year. Thank you. So I think we have 6 minutes left. If you have a question, I'm happy to try to answer them. Yes?
So these are all things that are basically already in Drupal and available.
Yes.
Do you have any predictions about something where Drupal maybe still lags behind, or something we don't have that we are going to focus on?
Okay, so the question is if there is anything that Drupal lacks or focus on in the future. Is that
something that we can focus on for the future of Drupal?
Well, I wouldn't build a spaceship based on Drupal right now. Or a power plant, correct.
Because it's not secure.
No, because it's not secure. It's just, if a space shuttle depends on code written by a lot of different people, I'm not saying that is immediately wrong, but I would add some additional reviews in there, maybe. Or, yeah, yesterday at the CXO, we came up with a horrible business idea based on Drupal that you can trade nuclear waste. To be honest, I really feel with Drupal 8 now out there, using all these tools, we are ready for the future like we have never been before. Yes, there are probably things that we are all waiting on, for example, commerce things, but they're all building. And again, they're built on open source, so you can talk to the people, you can look into the code, and you can see is that already possible or not. I really feel that with also the capability of adding Drupal into other systems, when we talk about websites in the future, Drupal is just going to be one part of that. And you use it for that part very perfectly, and I think it really has the place also in the future. It's just going to be a lot of other things like decoupled systems. But if we look at that as a general, I don't really see anything that could not be possible. Yes, Klaus.
Do you think Drupal will switch to JavaScript as a base programming language?
So the question is, so you mean specifically on front ends?
No,
or
everywhere?
Everywhere? No. So the question is, will Drupal completely switch to JavaScript everywhere? No, I don't believe so. Well, there is no need. If I look as a programming language as a tool that allows me to tell a computer what to do. And I really don't care if that is now built in JavaScript, in PHP, in Python, or in Java, or whatever. At the end, a programming language is my way to talk to the computer to do stuff. And we've chosen, more than 10 years ago, we've chosen PHP to use that. And that's perfectly fine. We all know already PHP, and that's perfectly cool. Yes, there are maybe things that you cannot build with PHP. Like parallelism is quite hard because the programming language is not just, or asynchronous, anything is not really built. There are people building that in. Should we really do that, or should we use another language? I don't know, but I think just saying, okay, no, let's just throw everything away and rebuild it with another cooler programming language, no, I don't feel so. And you see the same, like if you look at Facebook. They have the same problem. They started using PHP, and instead of like throwing everything away, they're just improving the existing system, and at the end, we all now profit from that. So I don't think that we will ever replace a programming language completely. If the question would be, will we have included more JavaScript included in Drupal that allows us to use, let's say, like a decoupled administration interface? I think, yeah, we will maybe probably go there, that we have more and more JavaScript involved inside of Drupal itself. Yes?
One question about personalization steps. So basically whole web should go into personalization? And second question related to that, do you think it will generate out even bigger concerns and problems related to privacy of user, even bigger than we have right now? Because basically it's all about spying users just to bring them back
Yes.
to experience.
Okay, so the question is, should everything be personalized, and doesn't personalization bring more privacy issues in the future? No, I don't think personalization in general is something good. I think personalization is a very powerful tool that you should use in specific ways where it makes a lot of sense, like in accessibility, for example, or like, if you know that that device cannot show any images, don't show it, or if you know that person has very bad internet connection, don't even try to send them a 3 megabyte picture or things like that. I think it is the responsibility of us as developers to really think about, okay, is that personalization that I'm building right now, is that an advantage for the client at the end or for the visitor of the site, or is it maybe an advantage for somebody else that they don't know? Because yes, with all this personalization, you can start spying on things. When I had the situation that on Facebook, it shows me exactly that product that I looked at it 4 hours ago, it was also scary. Because you're realizing now, oh shit, I cannot just go to one website and leave it and hope that all the things I did is now only known to that website. Because you will not know anymore who is doing that, and yes, you can install ad blockers and all these things, but you still don't know what that company does internally. So I think, yes, personalization is going to be a huge privacy problem in the future. But I don't think just because of that, we should not implement it. It's going to happen anyway. It's going to happen, and we should rather think about, okay, are there like ways to show to a visitor how his data is going to be used? I think that's a much better way in just saying, well, no, personalization is a bad thing. Let's not use it because of privacy issues. Yes?
I don't have a question necessarily, but maybe a thought. So with the future that we go like decoupled content and then also decoupled content backend, like when you consider the role of Drupal in the future, and like when you consider like that there are things out there like HTTP servers, like culture, the traditional like Drupal system that we have right now, it's kind of awesome. So I think we usually have to like to evolve to like from one system like to a set of multiple applications that are
Correct.
way together, like as a whole community. And then also the question of like the programming language like becomes different. It's like not the question of one language or the question of like the set of applications that we as a community want to like combine.
Full agree. So what he says is basically, yeah, Drupal is not going to be in the future, if you're going to build a website, it's not just installing Drupal and done. It's going to be a group of a lot of different tools, but things like containers and microservices allow you now technically to do that. So I fully agree. And I think we also have to see a bit of like the viewpoint of like, okay, do we talk about huge websites and small websites? It can maybe be that a small website is still built completely by Drupal, but then if I have a big website, I maybe disable the front-end part, and I say, okay, no, in that side, I'll replace that. So that happens already with Drupal, and I think that's just for us, all of us, something that we have to accept. Disagreeing with that and saying, no, that's wrong, that's all not gonna be good, that's probably gonna cost you your job. So I think we have to be open that, appreciate it, and do it. Okay, last question.
Drupal and microservice, somehow it doesn't go together very well. It's more like a monolithic big thing than a real microservice. So do you think there will be some change, like more model core or something like that? Or?
So the question is, yeah, Drupal and microservices doesn't really work nicely together. Well, it depends, like where do you see it? Like if like in Drupal 7, it was never possible to replace one key part of the Drupal core completely. Today, I can write my services YAML and I can say, okay, no, I disabled that part completely. It's not even ever loaded. So I would say internally in Drupal, yes, it already went on there that I can replace parts. If I don't like Twig, I just disable Twig completely and I add my own HTML renderer in there. Or if I don't like the routing component, I can just replace it. If I don't like the authentication, I can just replace. Like all these things is already possible. Never been possible with Drupal 7. If we talk about Drupal in general, like as a website, yes, I agree. It's still a lot of functionality. There is still a lot of modules that I cannot disable because they're just there, but I also know that that's just the first step of what we did. I don't think that all of that is done yet. It's going to be more and more in the future that we see, okay, well, we can split up that, we can split up that. The splitting up from a big application into smaller is not something you do in a week or two. We see it in Drupal, it takes years. But it's happening, and I feel we're going to see much, much more of that in the future. Okay, that's it. Enjoy your day. Go down and learn.